Hey folks, we are back with another garden preservation video today in honor of the Every Bit Counts challenge from Three Rivers Homestead. In my last video, I showed you more than just garden harvest preservation, such as rendering beef tallow for long-term shelf storage and making bone broth from our farm harvested chickens. Today, I am simply trying to use up as much produce as I can to get it all off of my counter. The summertime is trying on the homesteader, unlike any other season. While you're busy battling the pests and the weeds and the hot weather, you're also bringing in huge bounties from the garden that must be dealt with before they go bad. These next clips were taken over a few days, as I did my best to preserve something every day for long-term storage, no matter how little the amount. And that's the goal of the Every Bit Counts challenge. No matter how small, you increase your food preparedness by a small amount every day. On this day, I had a bunch of homegrown apples that my mom had picked from her home. I'm not sure of the variety, but they are organic and local, and I was very excited to receive this gift from her because I have yet to have any apples from my 2 apple trees. I have yet to see if my apple trees are even going to survive this summer, honestly. Now, I'm not a huge baker, and I don't cook a lot of desserts in my home since neither Chase or I have a sweet tooth. But there are tons of ways to preserve your fresh apple harvest. You can make apple butter, apple jelly, apple sauce, different kinds of relishes, or you can even freeze them for later use in pies and fillings. Although if you do have red delicious apples, they do not freeze very well. But it all depends on your taste preference and what you plan to do with them long term. Don't don't pick a preservation method that you'll never use. For our household, I thought the perfect thing for me to do with these would be to dehydrate them. I love dehydrated fruits as snacks, and they are the perfect lightweight food for camping, hiking, or hunting. You want to try and cut the apples into even chunks so that they all dehydrate at the same time, but of course it doesn't have to be perfect. I then lay them out on my dehydrator trays, making sure that they all have room to breathe. Of course, you can air dry them as well, depending on temperature and humidity levels in the ambient air, but their shelf life may not be as long. I'll leave a link down below from the University of Georgia that details drying fruits and vegetables. Now, if you're using a dehydrator, I recommend checking the manual of that specific dehydrator to find the temperature that you need. Mine recommends fruits to be at 145 degrees, and usually I will just put on a timer for several hours, come back and check it, and add more time if need be. These apples took about 15 hours to dry completely. I then placed them in a sealed glass jar and will keep them in a cool, dry place for storage. Dried fruits can last on the shelf for 6 to 12 months depending on the ambient temperature of your home. On this day, I decided to harvest a ton of cherry tomatoes that had been ripe in the garden. I have said before that I don't do a whole lot with cherry tomatoes besides snacking on them in the garden and giving them to the kids as a snack. But I decided to put my dehydrator to use again today and make some quote-unquote sun-dried tomatoes. Now I do have a bunch of slicer varieties coming in that I'm already using and preserving in different ways, especially freezing them for tomato sauce later. And I actually made a pretty awesome tomato soup from some blemished tomatoes right after this video. But I thought these chocolate pear tomatoes would be the perfect size to dehydrate for use later. Dehydrated tomatoes can be used in so many delicious ways. A few being as a pizza or bread topping, ground into tomato powder, cooked in olive oil for a dipping sauce or glaze, or just reconstituted in soups, stews, and other sauces. Tomatoes actually reconstitute quickly and have the texture of any other cooked tomato, so they're great for that. But most likely I will put some of these aside for reconstitution later, and then the rest I will grind into a tomato powder, which we use a lot of in this household. Now, a lot of people will put dried tomatoes in olive oil, such as just on their windowsill or somewhere to steep for long periods of time. And of course, it has been done with relative safety for centuries. But I will give a warning that flavored oils like that can be a breeding ground for botulism spores, which thrive in low acid and anaerobic environments. I'm not discouraging you from trying new things, or if you already do it and you have success, awesome. I can only encourage you to do research and practice safe preservation methods. I cut these pear tomatoes lengthwise to get as much of their insides open to the air and heat as possible. The last thing I want to do is run my dehydrator longer than need be in this hot weather, or worse, have moisture still inside them when I go to put them in a jar in my pantry. As tomatoes are botanically a fruit, I put them in at 145 degrees for 10 hours, though I assume they will most likely take longer than that. As of editing this video, they are still running, so we'll just have to check back up on them in the next one. This is the day after I harvested peppers with you guys, which you can check out in my last video. I will link it down below or up above. I picked a ton of different kinds of peppers, like padrones, pepperoncinis, Thai hots, red and green New Mexico chili, some serranos, and a massive amount of sugar rush peach peppers. On this day though, I am only going to preserve the banana peppers that I had left out for about a week to ripen on the plant. If y'all have been around here a while, I'm sure you've heard me say that I prefer to grow banana peppers over bell peppers. Bell peppers take so long to mature, and I only ever get a few from each plant, so I do not want to waste a ton of space in my garden just to harvest a few bell peppers towards the end of the summer. So instead, I grow banana peppers. Some may argue with me that they taste different from bell peppers, and I know that they do not have the same thick walls. But in all other regards, I feel that they are very similar. They throw out a ton of peppers on each plant, and I can also harvest them in similar ways to bell peppers, such as letting them ripen from green to yellow to orange or red. As you can see on the table, I have tons of different colors of banana peppers. Mostly, I will just use banana peppers daily in the kitchen for various meals that call for a sweet pepper, or I'll toss them in my eggs. And then with my hot peppers, I do a lot of fermentation and dehydration for storage. But with these extra banana peppers, I'm going to freeze them. Peppers freeze pretty well, and you don't even need to blanch them before you freeze them. Although they will not retain the same crispiness after freezing that you would get from fresh, they are going to be great in any recipe that calls for sauteed peppers. Mostly I am freezing these for things like tacos, fajitas, or use in stir fries. And for that reason, I'm cutting them lengthwise. And I am also taking out all of the seeds and as much of the pith as I can from inside. It is quite a tedious process on these tiny banana peppers, but that's not too much if you're doing a small amount of day. You can also freeze them in chunks or even larger pieces, but I'm keeping them to relative close size that I would saute them at. One thing you want to keep in mind though is to cut them a little bit bigger than you would normally, because they will have that rigidity loss in the freezer, and a thicker piece, like a thicker cut piece, might help mitigate that. Once they are done being cut, I'm going to flash freeze them, which is just putting them in the freezer before packaging so that they freeze individually and don't stick to each other. As you can see here, I'm just trying to lay them out as spaced as possible on a piece of parchment paper. I did not have another tray for this, so I ended up just throwing them all on there, but they froze and turned out okay and didn't stick to each other too badly. It just makes them easier to separate out into the packaging containers or bags that you want their final resting place to be. I decided to use my vacuum sealer because I won't be using these for several months, and if we're being honest, Ziploc freezer bags do not work that well. As long as I still have peppers coming in the garden, I want all of my excess to go into storage for use in the winter when I am no longer able to grow it fresh. And then with these vacuum seal bags, I can easily put them in my deep freezer and not worry about it until I need them. Of course, I also packaged more than one of these because I packaged them according to what I would use in one serving. But that is it, guys, and that's what I've done for the past couple days in my kitchen to help give me some food storage for the rest of the year. I encourage you to check out the tag Every Bit Counts challenge. It is very awesome. You will learn lots of things about preserving food, and I will catch you on the next one.